So stand with us for a moment in the mid-18th century, specifically on the island of Jamaica.
Right.
When you look at this place, this territory, you are not simply looking at a natural, beautiful tropical landscape.
No, not at all. You're looking at a fundamentally engineered landscape.
Engineered. I like that word.
It's really the essential context for understanding everything that happens here. Imagine a place where pretty much every single acre has been surveyed, claimed, fenced.
Drained, planted.
Exactly. Brutally planted. Jamaica, in this era, was Britain's undisputed jewel. I mean, arguably its most profitable colony.
And all of that wealth was tied to one thing.
Land. Strictly in land. It was all about creating these vast, efficient sugar estates where human beings were systematically treated as movable property within that system.
And the machine that kept this all running was bureaucracy. I mean, these planters were obsessive record keepers.
Oh, absolutely. Logging every shipment, every birth, every death.
Every sale, every punishment, all in their ledgers and private diaries. But sometimes, very, very rarely, a single entry just breaks through all that accounting.
And it gives us this little window into a hidden history.
Exactly. And our deep dive today is centered on just 134 words.
134 words, found in the private diary of a prominent enslaver named Thomas Thistlewood. And these words refer to a man named Apongo.
Also known by the name Wager.
That's right.
And our mission here is, well, it's ambitious. We're going to take those few sparse lines and pull from them this rare, detailed look at one of the most volatile periods in colonial history.
We want to show you exactly how land, personal identity, and violent organized resistance just collided in that system.
Ready to unpack this?
Let's do it.
Okay, so when Apongo first appears in Thistlewood's diary, he isn't categorized like most enslaved individuals were.
No, he's not just a unit of labor, not an asset line item.
He shows up as a problem. And that's a fascinating and deeply telling detail, isn't it?
It's a huge distinction because the entire plantation system was designed to strip away complexity, identity, personal history.
Just force everyone into a neat, predictable box.
Exactly. And the reason he's a problem is that the source details his life before his capture, a life that just completely defied the label of property.
Right. Thistlewood actually records that Apongo was a prince.
A prince from a West African state, a political entity that was said to have paid tribute to a larger kingdom called Dorm.
And his initial journey to the coast wasn't as a captive. It wasn't at the end of a chain.
No, it was a high-level diplomatic mission. Apongo was sent to Cape Coast Castle,
which was the central headquarters for all British trading operations on the coast. I mean, a massive nexus of power.
And what's fascinating here is the symmetry between these two worlds. Cape Coast Castle, where Apongo went to negotiate, was this colossal, formal, heavily fortified structure.
Built to manage extraction.
Precisely. Built to manage trade and extraction on a massive scale. It was an architecture of power, designed to facilitate British wealth. And in a way, it mirrored the imposing great houses on the Jamaican sugar estates.
But the diplomacy, it pivots catastrophically.
It becomes a betrayal. Somewhere between that mission's start and its finish, Apongo, this prince and diplomat, is seized, he's enslaved.
And then transported across the Atlantic to Jamaica. Instantly converted from a high-status political envoy into chattel property.
In a system where land was the only thing that truly mattered, and here is the really extraordinary, just heartbreaking detail.
Yeah.
Once on the island, Apongo makes a direct attempt to appeal for his freedom.
Which must have been incredibly rare.
An act of profound courage. And the source material notes he actually encountered the same British governor in Jamaica whom he had previously met in Africa.
Wow. So he knew him. In a diplomatic capacity.
Yes, so he went straight to the top, confronting the one man who knew who he really was.
He appealed to that former relationship, to his status.
To the betrayal. And his appeals were completely ignored. The colonial system, represented by that governor, it just refused to recognize his pre-existing status. His past, his rights, his humanity, all systematically denied because they conflicted with the island's economic logic.
That failure, then, the refusal to even acknowledge who he was, that must have just crystallized for him that the system had sealed off every legal avenue.
It's a powerful way to frame it. It left him with only one remaining option, a path he eventually took.
And this brings us right back to those 134 words. If the system was trying so hard to erase people, to categorize them, Why did Thistlewood bother recording Apongo's identity in such detail?
That's the key question.
Because it was colonial policy to actively strip enslaved Africans of their identity. First names were replaced, origins were deliberately blurred into these broad administrative labels.
Coromantee, Papo, Igbo.
Right, and the goal was to stop political organization based on a shared history.
And if you connect this back to the bigger picture, you see these classifications weren't just, careless labels. They were essential tools for the owners.
A mechanism of control.
A deliberate mechanism of control. For example, Coromantee became this catch-all term for people captured along the Gold Coast, and it often included high-status people, soldiers, merchants.
So what did the planters believe about this specific Coromantee group?
Well, they believed, often wrongly, that these groups were better suited for certain types of hard labor, but more importantly, they were cataloged based on their supposed tendency toward rebellion.
So it wasn't just ethnic grouping?
No, not at all. It was the deliberate practice of racialized property management.
Wow.
Assigning these generalized and often just invented characteristics to maximize control and minimize risk.
It's chilling. Managing people based on invented racial characteristics, all for the purpose of maximizing land productivity.
It is. But Apongo, with his detailed high-status background, he resists this neat logic.
He was too specific for his spreadsheets.
Precisely. He was a problem because his past, a man of clear political standing, did not fit the categories the plantation system desperately tried to impose. His identity was too complex, too real for their ledgers.
And his origins created a real historical puzzle, right? One that historians have debated for decades.
A big one. Thistlewood only called his tributary kingdom Dorme.
So what does that mean? Where was Dorne?
Well, for a long time, historians were split. Some connected Dorme to the powerful kingdom of Dahomey.
Which is in present-day Benin.
Exactly. And that link made sense geographically. There are records of diplomatic contact between Dahomey and the European coastal forts at that time.
But other historians have pointed out that the leaders of the big Jamaican revolts tended to be from areas that are, today, more aligned with Ghana.
The ones often categorized under that general Coromantee label.
So if Apongo was a key leader, maybe he must have been Ghanaian. The evidence seems to contradict itself.
And this leads us to the aha moment from more recent scholarship.
Yeah.
The conclusion is that Apongo's identity was probably not geographically fixed. It wasn't monolithic.
He was a diplomat. He was moving between different political worlds, languages, cultures.
Long before he ever set foot in Jamaica.
So the rigid, single-origin identity the planters tried to assign him was just flawed from the start.
Completely. Those administrative tools, those ethnic labels planters used, they were convenient for the owners, sure. They helped them decide where to assign labor or who to watch.
But they were not reality.
They did not reflect the complex, fluid, and cosmopolitan lived realities of the people they captured. Apongo's true identity was simply too big, too real, to be contained by their simplistic categories.
And here's where it gets really interesting. That complex identity, the one the system tried to strip away,
becomes the foundation for revolution.
Exactly. Having failed to appeal for his freedom legally, Apongo becomes one of the key organizational leaders in Tacky's revolt.
Tacky's revolt, which explodes onto the scene in 1760 and spills into 1761. This was monumental.
I mean, we're talking about the largest and most terrifying enslaved uprising in the British Empire before the 19th century.
The sheer scale and organization of it sent shockwaves through the entire colonial establishment.
It wasn't just a spontaneous riot. It was an organized military campaign.
It was. And the human cost, the destruction, was staggering. The rebellion resulted in the deaths of over 60 white colonists.
But the cost for the rebels was far, far greater.
So much greater. More than 500 enslaved Africans lost their lives, and hundreds more were brutally tortured, executed, or deported from the island in the gruesome aftermath.
And the deeper implication of the revolt was structural, wasn't it? It went right back to the land.
It absolutely did. The planters' immense wealth depended entirely on their belief that they had total, unwavering control over the land and the labor forced onto it. Tacky's revolt just exposed the terrifying fragility of that control.
So how did the physical land itself play a role in that failure?
Well, the planters designed their landscape for efficiency, right? Clearings for fields, roads for transporting sugar.
Right.
They wanted visibility and control.
Of course.
But Tacky and Apongo, they understood the dense, uncultivated interior, the cockpits, the hillsides, the overgrown gullies. better than their owners did.
So they used the terrain against them.
They took the landscape that was designed to control people and transport commodities, and they turned it into a landscape of organized revolution, of hiding.
Proving that the engineered landscape could, in the right hands, actually facilitate its own destruction.
It could. Apongo's personal story, sadly, concludes during that uprising. He died resisting the system that had stolen him, but not before proving how fragile it was.
And this is where we pivot to the long-term legacy of this. Apongo's story doesn't just end in 1760. His memory is, in a way, cemented in the property history of the island.
Mm-hmm.
We often think of land history in terms of, clean legal documents, titles, transfers. But what the source material forces us to realize is that the true narrative is about who was allowed to own land and who was forced to work it for generations without any claim to the ground beneath their feet.
Absolutely. And think about the modern relevance for a moment. Those former plantations that Apongo moved through, both as property and as a revolutionary, they're now these varied, complex landscapes. Some are overgrown ruins, some have evolved into modern towns, and some still hold families whose vast wealth began with the labor extracted from that very ground.
That's the key takeaway, isn't it? Tying that small diary entry to the large historical context.
It is. The land itself carries the memory of resistance just as powerfully as it carries the memory of extraction.
And Apongo, the diplomat betrayed and enslaved, is cemented in Jamaica's property history, not as an owner, but as this kind of ghost in the machine.
A ghost who exposed the violent hypocrisy of a system that valued land above everything and treated people as entirely expendable. His political stature before his capture, his leadership in the revolt, he broke their tidy records.
He was a force that couldn't be contained in a column in a ledger.
Simply couldn't.
So what does this all mean for us today, looking back through this powerful 134-word excerpt?
I think it means that landscapes are never passive or neutral.
They're designed environments, they're contested environments, and they are shaped quietly and violently by those who are forced to live and to resist within them.
And Apongo's story confirms a powerful historical interpretation we can carry forward. While colonial records tried desperately to impose rigid identities.
For property management, basically, to make people easier to count, categorize, and control.
Exactly. The true complex identities and political experience of the people, they ultimately broke those administrative categories. His status and his actions were simply too real, too dangerous to fit their simplistic labels.
So the final thought, the final provocation we want to leave you with is consider this idea of memory carried by the land. The next time you look at any formal, mapped, and claimed landscape, whether it's an old field or a modern suburb, just think, what unseen history of resistance, what story of violent contradiction might that ground hold that was never intended to be recorded in a planter's diary? Thank you for diving deep with us.